You're sitting across from someone you trust completely, someone who knows your dreams, your fears, the parts of yourself you don't show the world. Then, in a single sentence, they say something that makes your stomach drop. Maybe it's how they said it. Maybe it's what they chose not to say. In that exact moment, something inside you doesn't just break, it shifts permanently. Here's where it gets interesting. They don't see anything change. You're still smiling, still nodding, still look fine. So they have no idea they just activated something in you that's going to echo for weeks. Behind those calm eyes, you're running 1,000 calculations, replaying the conversation backwards, analyzing their tone, their word choice, their timing. You're even finding ways to excuse them while simultaneously knowing you can never look at them the same way again. This isn't sensitivity. This is strategic self-preservation. And once an INFJ enters permanent defense mode, there's no going back. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you're looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and your INFJ personality, browse our favorite INFJ products in the description, and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. The psychological trigger, when empathy becomes liability. INFJs operate from a core assumption that people match their stated values with their actions. When you tell an INFJ you value honesty, they believe you. When you say you care about them, they take that as fact. This isn't naivety, it's how their empathetic wiring works. They extend the same authenticity they offer to others. Disrespect reveals the incongruence between someone's claimed character and actual behavior. For other personality types, this might register as disappointment or annoyance. For INFJs, it's a psychological earthquake. Their dominant function, introverted intuition, immediately begins analyzing the gap between perception and reality. The secondary function, extroverted feeling, processes the emotional impact of being wrong about someone's character. This creates what psychologists call the nai-fi loop, a mental cycle where the INFJ becomes trapped between analyzing the situation and feeling the emotional weight of betrayal. They're simultaneously trying to understand how they misread the person while processing the pain of being disrespected by someone they trusted. The reason this hits INFJs differently than other types comes down to emotional investment. INFJs don't give their trust lightly. They've likely invested months or years of emotional labor based on what they believed was a mutual understanding of values and respect. When disrespect happens, it proves that investment was built on a false premise. The moment trust shifts from a renewable resource to a finite commodity marks the psychological trigger point. Before disrespect, an INFJ might think, if I explain myself better, they'll understand. After disrespect, the internal dialogue becomes, I was wrong about this person's capacity for understanding. This realization triggers immediate psychological protocols that most people never see. The INFJ's mind begins what can only be described as a complete relationship audit. They're not just processing the current disrespect. They're reevaluating every interaction they've had with this person through a new lens. The internal monologue sounds something like this. If they could disrespect me now, what does that say about all the times they claimed to care? Were they being authentic then? Or am I just now seeing their true character? How many other signs did I miss because I wanted to believe they were who they said they were? What makes this particularly devastating for INFJs is that their empathy, which is usually their greatest strength, becomes a liability. Their ability to see multiple perspectives means they'll spend hours trying to justify the other person's behavior. They'll consider that maybe the person was stressed, maybe they didn't mean it, maybe there's context they're missing. But underneath all that rationalization, the INFJ's intuition has already reached its conclusion. The data doesn't lie. This person is capable of disrespecting them, which means this person doesn't value them the way they claim to. And once an INFJ sees that incongruence, they can't unsee it. The exhausting part isn't the disrespect itself. It's the mental gymnastics the INFJ performs trying to make the disrespect fit with their previous understanding of the person. They want to believe it was an aberration, but their pattern recognition function won't let them ignore what just happened. This is when the INFJ realizes their empathy has been weaponized against them. Their willingness to understand others, to give the benefit of the doubt, to assume positive intent, all of these traits that make them incredible friends and partners, have left them vulnerable to someone who doesn't operate with the same values. The psychological trigger isn't just about the disrespect. It's about the INFJ's dawning awareness that they've been playing by rules the other person never agreed to follow. The silent assessment phase, forensic analysis mode. The first 24 to 48 hours after disrespect are when the INFJ becomes most dangerous, not to others, but to their own peace of mind. While everyone else assumes the INFJ either didn't notice the slight or has moved on, the opposite is happening. The INFJ has entered what can only be described as forensic analysis mode. This isn't emotional processing. This is methodical investigation. The INFJ's mind becomes a crime scene investigator, going back through the entire relationship history, looking for evidence they missed. They're not just analyzing the moment of disrespect. They're conducting a complete audit of every interaction, every conversation, every promise this person ever made. The pattern recognition function that makes INFJs so insightful in normal circumstances now becomes relentless. They're reviewing text messages from months ago, looking for subtle signs of insincerity. They're remembering conversations where something felt off, but they dismissed their intuition. They're connecting dots they didn't even know existed. The INFJ runs through what I call the three-question framework, though they're not consciously aware they're doing it. First, was this disrespect intentional? They'll analyze tone, timing, word choice, and context to determine if the person meant to hurt them or if it was careless. Second, is this part of a recurring pattern? They're looking for evidence that this isn't an isolated incident, but rather a glimpse into the person's true character. Third, can I trust my own judgment? This is the most devastating question because it turns the analysis inward. What makes this phase particularly exhausting is that INFJs don't react immediately. Other personality types might confront the issue right away or express their hurt openly. INFJs go silent because they're building an airtight case. They need to be absolutely certain before they make any decisions about the relationship. During this silent assessment, the INFJ is simultaneously fighting two battles. The first battle is against the evidence. They're desperately trying to find explanations that don't require them to accept that someone they cared about actually disrespected them intentionally. Maybe the person was having a bad day. Maybe they're dealing with stress the INFJ doesn't know about. Maybe there's context that would make the disrespect understandable. The second battle is against themselves. INFJs have a devastating tendency to assume they're somehow responsible for other people's poor behavior. So while they're analyzing the other person's actions, they're also scrutinizing their own. Did they communicate their boundaries clearly enough? Did they somehow invite this treatment? Were their expectations unrealistic? This creates an exhausting mental loop where the INFJ is simultaneously trying to excuse the other person's behavior while also blaming themselves for causing it. They'll spend 12 straight hours mentally replaying a 5-minute conversation from every possible angle. They'll consider scenarios where they misunderstood the person's intent. They'll even question whether they're being too sensitive or expecting too much. The cruel irony is that this thorough analysis, which the INFJ thinks will bring clarity, often leads to more confusion. The more they analyze, the more questions arise. The more they try to understand the other person's perspective, the more they doubt their own. But here's what most people don't realize about this phase. The INFJ isn't analyzing because they're confused about what happened. Deep down, their intuition already knows the truth. The analysis is actually an attempt to avoid accepting that truth, because accepting it means acknowledging that someone they trusted is capable of treating them poorly. The forensic analysis phase ends when the INFJ can no longer deny the evidence they've collected. All the rationalization, all the benefit of the doubt thinking, all the attempts to blame themselves, none of it can overcome the clear pattern they've uncovered. The person who disrespected them has shown their true character, and no amount of analysis can change that reality. Once this conclusion solidifies, the INFJ moves into the next phase. The assessment is complete. The verdict is in. And now the real changes begin. The strategic withdrawal, emotional resource reallocation. Once the forensic analysis concludes, INFJs don't explode or confront. They do something far more calculated. They systematically reduce their investment in the relationship while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. This isn't punishment, though it might feel like it to the other person. This is protection. The INFJ implements what I call the 70% rule. They maintain enough social acceptability to avoid drama or awkwardness, but they cut their emotional availability by roughly 70%. The relationship continues, but it operates under completely different terms that only the INFJ fully understands. This withdrawal is so subtle that most people don't notice it immediately. The INFJ still responds to texts, still shows up to gatherings, still engages in conversation. But something fundamental has shifted. The warmth is turned down to exactly the socially acceptable minimum. The depth is gone. The vulnerability has been retracted. Where conversations used to go deep, they now stay surface level. The INFJ, who used to ask thoughtful follow-up questions, now gives polite but brief responses. The person who used to remember every detail about your life now seems to have a much shorter memory. They're not being mean about it. They're just less. The INFJ becomes what can only be described as a polite stranger with someone they once trusted deeply. They'll discuss the weather, work, current events, anything that doesn't require emotional investment. But the intimate conversations, the vulnerable sharing, the deep connection that once characterized the relationship, that's been quietly withdrawn. This creates profound confusion for the other person. They sense something has changed, but can't pinpoint exactly what. The INFJ is still present, still friendly, still technically available. But there's a distance that wasn't there before, a coolness that feels almost imperceptible, but definitely real. When questioned about the change, the INFJ will usually deflect with perfectly reasonable explanations. They've been busy with work. They have a lot on their plate lately. They're going through a stressful period. All technically true, but not the whole truth. The real truth is that they've made a strategic decision to protect their emotional resources from someone who has proven they don't value them appropriately. The conversation shift is perhaps the most noticeable change, though it happens so gradually that it's easy to miss. The INFJ, who used to initiate deep discussions, now waits for others to bring up meaningful topics. The person who used to share their thoughts and feelings freely now keeps those insights to themselves. They've learned that this person doesn't deserve access to their inner world. What makes this withdrawal so effective is that it's not dramatic enough to call out directly. If the INFJ actually confronted the person or had an emotional outburst, there would be something concrete to address. But this slow reduction of emotional availability is harder to argue against. You can't demand that someone be more emotionally invested in you. You can't force someone to share their thoughts and feelings. The INFJ is essentially saying, I can't trust you with the best of me anymore, but I can coexist with you at this reduced level. They're conserving their energy for relationships that have proven worthy of their depth. They're protecting themselves from further hurt by limiting what they offer. This isn't vindictive behavior. It's resource management. INFJs have a finite amount of emotional energy, and they've learned not to waste it on people who don't appreciate its value. The person who disrespected them has shown they're not capable of handling the INFJ's vulnerability with care. So the INFJ simply stops offering it. The strategic withdrawal becomes the new permanent baseline for the relationship. The INFJ doesn't expect things to return to how they were before, because they understand something the other person might not. Trust, once broken in this specific way, doesn't regenerate. The relationship will continue, but it will operate under these new, reduced terms indefinitely. This reallocation of emotional resources allows the INFJ to maintain the relationship without risking further hurt, while freeing up energy to invest in connections that have proven more worthy of their depth and vulnerability. Defense mode activation. The irreversible shift. Once activated, INFJ defense mode doesn't deactivate even if the person apologizes profusely, promises to change, or claims they didn't mean it. This isn't stubbornness or an inability to forgive. It's psychological evolution based on new data about someone's character. The psychological reason defense mode becomes permanent lies in how INFJs process trust violations. When someone disrespects an INFJ, they've revealed their true capacity for care. They've shown that under certain circumstances, stress, distraction, annoyance, or simple carelessness, they're willing to treat the INFJ poorly. That capacity doesn't disappear with an apology. An INFJ's internal monologue during this phase sounds like this. You showed me who you are when you thought it didn't matter. You revealed how you actually see me when your guard was down. An apology doesn't erase that data. It just tells me you're sorry I caught you being authentic. This is why apologies often feel hollow to INFJs after disrespect. The person is essentially asking the INFJ to pretend they didn't see what they clearly saw. They're asking the INFJ to ignore evidence and return to a state of trust that no longer makes logical sense. The shift from unconditional to conditional trust is irreversible because it's based on demonstrated reality, not perception or misunderstanding. Before the disrespect, the INFJ operated from the assumption that this person would never intentionally hurt them. After the disrespect, the INFJ knows this person is capable of hurting them, which fundamentally changes the risk assessment of the relationship. INFJs begin viewing the relationship through what can only be described as a new operating system. Where trust was once given freely, it's now earned in small increments. Where vulnerability was once offered openly, it's now carefully rationed. Where benefit of the doubt was automatic, skepticism becomes the default. The person might notice that conversations feel different, that the INFJ seems more guarded, that there's a subtle distance that wasn't there before. They might ask if everything is okay, and the INFJ will usually say yes, because technically, everything is okay. The relationship is functioning. It's just functioning under new terms that protect the INFJ from experiencing that particular type of hurt again. What makes this shift so definitive is that it's not emotional, it's strategic. The INFJ isn't acting out of anger or wounded feelings. They're implementing a logical response to new information about someone's character. They've learned that this person requires different handling, different boundaries, different expectations. The relationship continues, but it operates with reduced expectations and increased vigilance. The INFJ no longer assumes positive intent. They no longer give the benefit of the doubt automatically. They no longer invest their full emotional capacity. These aren't punishments, they're adaptations. This creates a strange dynamic where the relationship might appear normal from the outside, but the INFJ is essentially managing a different person than they thought they knew before. They're interacting with someone they now understand is capable of disrespecting them, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. The person who triggered defense mode might feel like they're walking on eggshells, sensing that something has changed, but unable to identify exactly what. They might feel like they're being held at arm's length, like they've lost access to something important in the INFJ that they used to have freely. The truth is, they have lost access. They've lost access to the INFJ's unconditional trust, their automatic benefit of the doubt, their full emotional availability. These things were withdrawn not as punishment, but as protection. The INFJ has learned that this person requires boundaries they didn't know they needed before. Defense mode becomes the new permanent baseline because the INFJ now has data they can't unknow. They've seen this person's capacity for disrespect, and that capacity doesn't disappear with time or apologies. The INFJ's relationship with this person will forever be informed by this knowledge, and their behavior will forever be adjusted to account for this risk. The aftermath: living in permanent defense mode. Defense mode fundamentally changes how INFJs approach all future relationships, not just the one that triggered it. They become more selective about who they trust, more careful about how much they reveal, more strategic about their emotional investments. This isn't cynicism, it's evolved discernment. The positive side of this transformation is that INFJs develop stronger boundaries and better judgment. They learn to recognize red flags earlier. They become less likely to overinvest in people who haven't proven worthy of their depth. They develop what might be called protective intuition, the ability to sense when someone isn't safe for their vulnerability. However, this heightened awareness comes with costs. INFJs may find themselves holding back in relationships that could actually be safe. They might test people more thoroughly before trusting them. They might maintain emotional distance longer than necessary because they're protecting themselves from potential future hurt. The INFJ's new operating system treats trust as something earned in small increments rather than given freely. Where they once assumed people were good until proven otherwise, they now assume people are unknown quantities until they demonstrate consistent respect and care over time. This shift protects them, but can also limit the depth of new connections. Some relationships never recover, even after sincere apologies and changed behavior. The person might genuinely regret their actions and work hard to rebuild trust, but the INFJ can't unknow what they learned about that person's character. They've seen the person's capacity for disrespect, and that knowledge permanently informs how they interact with them. The growth aspect of permanent defense mode is significant. INFJs learn to value themselves as much as they value others. They recognize that not everyone deserves access to their emotional depth, their insights, their vulnerability. They develop the ability to say no without guilt and walk away from relationships that drain more than they give. This evolution often surprises people who knew the INFJ before their defense mode activated. The person who used to be endlessly understanding might now have clear limits. The person who used to give everyone the benefit of the doubt might now require proof of good intentions. The person who used to absorb others' emotional needs might now prioritize their own well-being. Living in permanent defense mode means the INFJ has learned one of life's hardest lessons, that their empathy and care are precious resources that should be protected and given only to those who truly value them. They've learned that self-preservation isn't selfish, it's necessary. Defense mode isn't dysfunction. It's psychological evolution after betrayal. The INFJ who emerges from this process is stronger, wiser, and more discerning about who deserves their trust. If you're an INFJ, your protective instincts are valid wisdom. Subscribe for more insights into the INFJ mind. If you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos, where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.